Verbal abuse. It's far more common than we like to think, and we don't even like the sound of the word, do we? Nobody wants to think that people are being verbally abusive, and no one wants to believe that they're being verbally abused. So sometimes we make excuses for it, we rationalize it, we justify it, and still we take it. And it's really important to call it what it is and to see it for what it is. And it's more common than we'd like to think, and it may be happening to you. So where is the line between someone being strict and somebody being verbally abusive? It's a fine one for sure, but for others, there's no question what's what. And that verbal abuse gets built into us. Somehow it seems normal. And we go on, even tolerating it from our parents, our partners, our coworkers, our friends. And when you've been verbally abused, one of three things usually happens. A, you will often repeat the verbal abuse because that's the way you've learned to do life. Or B, you live in fear of other people being abusive, and so you become a people pleaser, and you take what other people hand out, and sometimes you even believe it's your fault. Or C, you get some help to become your own person so you can live your own values and your vision for your life and actually take back your life and say no to having any more verbal abuse. And those three things do not include being verbally abusive to yourself or anyone else, particularly not to your children. I did a little research about this, and being verbally abusive, it gives you, the abuser, or you, whichever it is, a sense of power over someone. And in the National Domestic Violence Hotline, they were speaking about being abused by your partner, and they give this definition. See if it rings true for anybody in your life. Abuse is a repetitive pattern of behaviors to maintain power and control over an intimate partner. These are behaviors that physically harm, arouse fear, prevent a partner from doing what they wish, or force them to behave in ways they do not want. Abuse includes the use of physical and sexual violence, threats and intimidation, emotional abuse, and economic deprivation. Many of these different forms of abuse can be going on at any one time. Wow, that's scary. And to think that it's more common than we would hope is also scary. And I know a lot about this, and that's why I do the work that I do, and that's why I want people to know about it, because my mother was both verbally and emotionally abusive. Now, did I know that when I was a kid? I did, but I didn't have a name for it. And I didn't know that everybody else's mothers weren't doing that when I was very small. It just felt really bad. And I hated the way she constantly put me down, found daily things, sometimes hourly things to criticize. And one of her best was how often she told me she had never wanted kids. I guess there's no question why I'm an only child. So even though it felt all wrong as a child, I, like all other children, was powerless to define another way of thinking about myself than what my mother served up every day. And you might be having a recollection of that experience yourself. And where was my father in all this? Well, he stayed away from home as often as possible. He couldn't stand her either. So looking back, it's not surprising that he decided to become a commercial fisherman when I was very young. He had then an ironclad reason for being away 6 months of the year. Not surprisingly, all he was going through, he had serious health issues, and that put him in the hospital for most years, for at least 3 months during his time at home. And the rest of that time, he spent it in the pool room. And in those days, the pool room was off limits to women. So he figured it out. He figured out how not to be around her. But in figuring that out, he failed to realize that he left me with her. That was not a great choice. So another phase of abuse in my young life, my father wouldn't come home on time for dinner, of course. He didn't want to be with my mother. And so my mother would drive me to the pool room and force me to go in and get him. Do you see how that's abuse? I hope so, because that's just not appropriate on any level. None of us are alone in this, although most of us felt very alone. In fact, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, December 17th, 2010 edition, they said that about a quarter of the more than 26,000 adults surveyed reported experiencing verbal abuse as children. Nearly 15% had been physically abused, and more than 12%, more than 1 in 10, had been sexually abused as a child. Almost 1 in 5 people had lived as a child with someone who was depressed, mentally ill, or suicidal. Wow. Okay, so if you think you're the only one having that experience, now you know there's a whole lot more people going through it too, or have gone through it. And because it starts to become horribly, quote unquote, normal to those who have experienced it, you just don't see it. At least not in the beginning. You may see it in other people, but not in yourself. You may not actually get in touch with what's happened to you, if you ever do, until you're trying to figure out why you can't find love, or why you're in a relationship or relationship after relationship that just isn't working. When the pain and loneliness, remember that it can feel terribly lonely in a relationship when you've had this in your background. When that pain and loneliness become too much, you finally get some professional help. I hope you do anyway. And that's when you uncover what you absorbed in your early life intentionally. No, but very unintentionally and definitely without your permission. And when you uncover that that's been part of your experience, you will also begin to see that it has been silently sabotaging your life. So when you get some help, and I help my clients with this, so I know, when you get some help, you learn some really important things. You can heal. You can stop feeling there is something wrong with you. Hooray. You can give up blaming yourself. That's important. Start that one now. You can give up blaming your partner, because blame in any form is not going to help anybody, and it won't help you feel better, even though it might help you get your anger out. You can find your own personal power, and I really hope you do. And you can release yourself from the shackles of the past and feel free. In fact, it can give you a whole new lease on life. And I hope that you will get help if you are experiencing this or have it in your past, because it's affecting how you feel about yourself. It's affecting how you interact with others, what you expect of others. It's just affecting all of that. So verbal abuse, whether saved for behind closed doors, which it often is, or screamed really loudly in the supermarket, you've seen and heard that, has a definite negative effect on everyone. And it is far too common. I've said that a few times, so really get that. You may have felt very alone. You may have felt that nobody else was experiencing it, but it is far too common. And you want to explore this within yourself and increase your emotional health. So you need some insights, some support, and some strategies for dealing with it, because it can be keeping you from experiencing the love and respect and safety in relationships that you're longing for. It's what we want. We want to feel safe with somebody else. We want to be able to trust right down to our toes. And when we've had this in our past, we find that very, very difficult. And you know what I'm talking about, because you look at everybody, you want to trust, but can you trust? Are you going to be safe with them? So not getting help and still experiencing the effects of verbal abuse, that's just too high a price to pay. And it keeps taking a toll on you. So get some help to see it and name it and eradicate it from your life. You really deserve that. Talk soon.